Guys, welcome to Box, the football talk show powered by Sportology TV. My name's Ouney. This is my co-host, Ali Drew. Before Ali talks about or introduces our guest, you'll sort of know his voice more than you'll know his face today. It's a bit of a weird one, but you'll definitely recognize our voice when he starts talking. I just want to recap on last week's show. We had two great ex-footballers, now pundits, in Darren Bent and Steve Sidwell, both talking about their former teams and how they getting on this season, talking about the handball rule, which is causing absolute riots in the Premier League this season. Also talking about pay-per-view football. World's gone crazy. I thought 2020 couldn't get any crazier, but it's getting crazy. If you guys haven't seen that, we're going to put a link up for you guys somewhere. And make sure you share, subscribe, like, do whatever you can to support the channel. We also have our social media links in the description below. So that's me, Jan, Ali. This week, we've got a huge guest again.
Yeah, so we have two guests joining us this week, but first up, we have a commentator and sports broadcaster who you'll hear currently on TalkSport and on ITV. We are delighted to be joined by Sam Matterface. Sam, how are you? How is life treating you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yeah, I think we're all sort of worrying about whether or not we're going to end up being told we can't go to this or that football match. But at the moment, we're in a privileged position in the fact that we still get to go to matches, which I know is a bit more fortunate than a lot of people at the moment who would love to be doing that. But I'm lucky enough to be able to keep touring the country at present. I don't know how long it's going to go on for, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Sam, how do you... I just want to talk about that, first of all. Before I talk about football and the current issues in football, I want to talk about you as a commentator and someone who's been around the football scene for a long time. I've recognised your voice for, I don't know, however long. Every time I'm in the car, I put on TalkSport, your voice is there, you're there. How's that sort of life treating you in regards to going to games now compared to what it was before when the fans were there and there was a bit more of an atmosphere?
Yeah, it's hard. It's weird. It's odd. It's alien, isn't it? I mean, you going to a football match without the lifeblood, which is the supporters. Let's be honest. Look, we all go to football. One of the things that carries us all through is the noise. Our commentary sort of only sounds the way it does is because of the noise that carries you on the wave through to those big moments. So it's very odd. I mean, it's a strange scenario because you sort of go to this big football arena, which is obviously designed to hold 60,000, 70,000, depending on where you are, supporters. And the only people there are a few sprinklings of journalists and stewards and dignitaries. There's been a few more people that have been creeping in over the last few weeks and months, I think. But certainly, it's nothing like Premier League football that we're used to. And that I don't know what the solution is, but I do hope that it isn't too long before we start getting safely fans back in the ground.
There's actually talk, and I think they were talking when England were playing over the last weekend that the cinemas were open and there was encouragement from the government to get people into the cinemas and whatever else. So why not try to get fans into the stadiums? What's your sort of thought on that?
My thought on it is if we can do it and we can do it safely, then we should be doing it. I think the clubs have done a great job in designing systems and protocols to be able to allow it to happen. I went down to Brighton the other week and they've still got a lot of their signage and messaging up around the stadium from when they hosted a test event against Chelsea in a pre-season friendly at the end of August. So it has already been done. I'm sure it will be done again in the future, but how long in the future, I don't know in terms of those test events. But at the moment, the government have withdrawn any hope of getting test events off the ground. And until that happens with more people, it isn't going to return. But I think the issue is twofold. It can come across to football supporters if they're being treated as second-class citizens. And that's not a very nice thing to be made to feel, because they'll look at the theatre audiences and they'll look at some of there was a discussion, a talk with Arsene Wenger the other week in a theatre, and that seemed to be heavily populated with people from the pictures that I saw. And yet, unless you're playing down the pyramid, you can't get fans inside the ground. And then you're talking, I was talking to a referee the other day I think he was working on a Northern Premier League game, and he said there'll be 600 people at his game today. And I said, well, that would be the biggest crowd of the day, won't it? I mean, because you can't obviously get into a Premier League game. I was going to the Merseyside derby. He was going to a Northern Premier League game, and more people were going to go in and watch his match than they were going to watch the game that I was going at, which is usually completely the other way round. You'd expect so many people there. Look, football isn't football without supporters. The reason it's so successful as a marketable product around the world is because of the atmosphere that's inside the stadium. We have to develop a system of doing it safely. I don't know what the solution is. I just have to hope that it's going to change soon.
Just carrying on the theme in regards to the fans, we know that last week the news broke out that football was going to pay-per-view. And this weekend it sort of went into place. I think the United game was on pay-per-view, and so was the Chelsea game. I think the Leicester game was on there as well. What do you make of that situation? Because a lot of ex-footballers have come out and said it's probably the wrong time to be introducing this, seeing as a lot of people are being laid off, or they're not receiving the income that they were receiving pre-COVID. What do you make of the whole situation at the moment?
They're all available on the radio for free. That's the first thing I'd say.
Shameless plug that.
The second thing is that it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very good from the Premier League. I know that they too have been in a situation where they're losing money and they're not bringing in the revenue that they expect to bring in, and they're trying desperately. A lot of clubs are trying desperately to find a way of maximising their revenue at a very difficult time. But ultimately, if you're spending on transfer fees, which a lot of Premier League clubs did, and if you look at the Premier League in comparison to the Dutch league, the Portuguese league, the German league, and I think the French league, I think they spent more than all of those leagues put together combined in terms of transfers. If you're spending that sort of money on recruiting talent, which is great, and I'm sure we're delighted to see it, I'm sure you don't need to raise 15 quid for 30,000 people to watch a football match on TV. I don't know what the figures are in terms of who's going to buy it. Some people would say, yeah, well, it's £15 is nothing in comparison to what you'd pay to go to an actual match. Slightly different going to a football match. I mean, there's a bit more of an experience to be had when you're going to a match. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're going to pay top dollar for it, you expect a top product as well. So I think that it's incumbent on TV companies to ensure. I mean, it's not the TV company's fault, by the way. This is a Premier League diktat, and it's the clubs that have decided this, not the broadcasters. So Sky and BT are guiltless in this. They've just been asked to provide a service. But you expect a premium product. It's as simple as that. And I just don't think it looks very good. And I do hope that we don't get to a situation where we're not choosing the 5 best matches that go on the normal broadcast contracts, and we start picking some of the big derby matches that end up being further behind the paywall. Some people haven't got their refunds from their last season ticket, by the way, which they didn't get full value from.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing that's very controversial this season is the VAR ruling and the rules that have changed for this season. There's been a lot of games, that have sort of the results have changed because of VAR and the new rules. What do you make of it all? And do you think that you like the new rules? They need to change? What do you think?
I think the biggest issue is the constant changing of the laws, the constant changing of interpretation, and the plethora of the number of rule changes we've had over the last 4 or 5 years. I did a piece on the radio this morning when I was talking about this, and as a football journalist, as someone who spends their time studying the laws of the game once a year and constantly going for top-up sessions and talking to members of the refereeing community to ensure that you know and understand the laws of the game, it's difficult for me to keep up with. Now, most people, I would imagine, are not as sad as I am. Most people, it isn't their job to know the laws of the game. So it's quite confusing if you keep changing the law every summer. My dad doesn't know the laws of the game, not intricately. He knows the basic simple rules of a football match, and obviously understands some of the complexities. But when the intricacies of those laws are changing at such a rapid rate and so frequently, it becomes unpalatable for people. Football's beauty is its simplicity. That is why everybody loves the game. That's why the world over, everybody is in love with this wonderful sport that gives us so much joy. Overcomplicating it and constantly changing it for for some sort of pursuit of perfection, which nobody actually really wants. Let's be honest, we don't want perfection. If we had perfection, we wouldn't be able to have 2 days worth of debates about whether or not something was offside or onside, or whether it was a foul or wasn't a foul, whether it was handball or not. So I just think it's a full-on task, and I think they're wasting their time, and they should probably take their foot off the gas now and just go, right, let's just scale this back a little bit, because we're becoming too draconian.
You know what?
Do you think it's taken away a little bit from the sort of joys of, you know, the natural handballs that happen, things like that happen? If they're not intentional. Do you think it's sort of taken away? It's also stopping play. So do you think it's maybe taken away some of the joy of a football match, playing and watching?
I don't know what the point of it is. I don't understand what you're trying to achieve by increasing the sort of serious sort of implementation, the to the letter implementation of handball, that every touch of a hand is a handball. What are you trying to achieve by that? Is it more penalties? Is it more goals? If your ultimate achievement is supposed to be, I want more goals, why are you measuring offside to the millimetre in order to rule out goals? Why are you looking for fouls that could rule out goals as well, or handballs that could rule out goals? So I don't get what the overall goal is. I'm not on board with what the strategy behind the constant law change is. I think the law changes have been brought in to satisfy a televisual audience and to satisfy a VAR protocol, rather than the VAR actually being there to implement the laws of the game as they were.
Sam, you spoke about sort of offsides and stuff just then, and debating over offsides. There is that big debate that happened this weekend, and now we know the handball rule and the controversy that's going on with that, and that's a whole different topic, and we could talk about that for ages. But the offside, Liverpool's goal in the last minute of the game against Everton, it was absolutely crazy, because when you look at it, and the way they tried to justify it was that both lines were meeting when they actually did the VAR. Both lines were meeting, but it was out by maybe a feather. But
that's the current protocol. So there's nothing they can really do about that. If they believe, and everybody's judged by this standard. So this is across the Premier League. It went against Liverpool this weekend. It went against Sheffield United last year. It will go against somebody else in 2 weeks' time. That's the current protocol that we are using. So although I couldn't see the offside, although I couldn't get my head around where it was that he was being measured, I also know that the lines that they display on the broadcast camera are slightly thicker than the ones that they use to measure it back in Stockley Park. Now, even with all that information, I still can't see where the offside takes place. But by the by, the technology that is available, and it's not perfect, is measuring everybody by the same standard. So fine, whatever. The offside, I can sort of deal with. The application of the VAR at the Merseyside derby, I just can't get my head around. I can't get why David Coote, the VAR official in Stockley Park, didn't look at the Jordan Pickford challenge and think, hold on a second, that is a serious piece of foul play. We need to check out the laws of the game and how they can be applied here, because he has not only injured Virgil Van Dijk and taken him out for a very, very long time. He's caused untold grief going forward for Liverpool too. I mean, he disrupted that match, but disrupted so many matches going forward.
Do you think that more should have been done there? Do you think that they've now said that there's going to be no further action against Pickford? But do you think that they should have had?
No, not necessarily after the event. That that's gone and done and whatever. But he should have been sent off. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I don't think any right-minded football fan that isn't an Everton supporter would be sitting here saying anything other than he should have been sent off. Of course he should have been. But mistakes happen. These things happen. The worst thing about it is that Virgil Van Dijk is seriously injured. That's a real major blow. I mean, if he had done that tackle and nothing really had come of it, and Virgil Van Dijk had been fine to carry on, or even come off in that game and then was okay to play the next one, I think we'd be a little bit more forgiving about the decision. I think the issue is that we know how serious the injury is. And the laws of the game have been changed. Let's forget the ones that have been changed recently. But the laws of the game have been changed over the last 15 years in order to prevent and minimise massive injuries.
Talking about this weekend, then talking about this season. Actually, the season's been absolutely crazy when you think about some of the results that have happened, some of the games, very high-scoring games. But the one that sort of stood out for myself was the one yesterday, Spurs West Ham. Spurs sort of cruising it, winning. They should have maybe scored another 2 goals towards the end. I think Harry Kane hit the post. Gareth Bale was through, missed that, but then they get paid back and by a crazy goal. Last couple of minutes, 25-yard screamer into the top corner. Talk to me about that, Sam. What did you make of that one?
Football, making mugs of everybody since 1870. I mean, wow. What a fantastic end to the game. Not if you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan or Jose Mourinho or Harry Kane or Gareth Bale, but it was a fantastic end to the match. And the Lanzini goal was nothing short of fabulous. It was terrific. What a hit. I mean, there's obviously the 2 previous goals were entirely avoidable, but there was nothing that anybody could do about that one. I think I sent a text message to someone halfway through the first half where Tottenham were taking West Ham to the cleaners, in which I said, seriously, I've got this not horrible theory, but I've got this weird sort of feeling that something odd is going to happen this season, because you mentioned about the goals and how many have been conceded and odd results like the Liverpool one against Aston Villa and the Manchester City one against Leicester, if you could class that as an odd result. Even Leicester's 2 home defeats back to back. I mean, all odd results. Chelsea throwing away leads every 5 minutes. And I just think that something weird is going to happen this year. It's going to be a slightly odd Premier League. Someone's going to win it that you maybe wouldn't expect to win it, possibly. I don't know. But I just think it's not going to be your typical Premier League season where someone marches out in front and then they lead right to the end, or even a 2-horse race. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive than that, and it's going to go on for a long time. I sent someone a message saying it's going to be Tottenham. Tottenham are going to be that team. They're going to be up there. He's sussed it. He's clever, that Mourinho bloke. He's realised that scoring goals is the most important thing in this league, because everybody else is letting so many in, and he's got natural defensive instincts. He'll probably concede less than most of the other teams, and he's got that brilliant strike force. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic season for him. Anyway, that was at half time, and then at full time I was like, "No, they got no chance. They can't defend for toffee." It's crazy. What a crazy match. And do you know what? What brilliant entertainment. I watched most of the matches, I think, live this week. I think the only one I missed was the Chelsea Hampton one, because I was travelling back from the Merseyside derby. I think I watched every other match that has been played this weekend live. And I tell you what, that Tottenham West Ham one, you'd have paid per view for that one, wouldn't you? You'd have slapped your 15 quid down and you would have got your money's worth.
You know, you spoke about it there, where it does seem a crazy season. And I'm mentioning it to even my brother and a few of my cousins that it looks like one of them seasons like that Leicester season again, where it's going to be a team that people are not even going to predict. It's very early still, 4 games, they've only played some
very early.
But it has that feel about it. You have Everton, who seem to be this revived team with these great signings. You got Mourinho and his Spurs who are doing their thing. And then you got Man United, who are just all over the place defensively. You got these big teams who seem to be defensively got massive defensive errors in them. But for you, if there was going to be one team that not pips the title, but sort of makes its name this season and stands out from the rest, apart from the top 4, the top 2 that we know of, which team do you reckon that'd be?
Well, I think Aston Villa's recruitment has been superb for a start. I think that Everton's recruitment has been superb. Both those 2 teams have very good 11s now. Yeah. I think the issue that we might have going into the second half of the season, it's interesting you mentioned that, it is worth pointing out, it's very early. We're at the end of middle of October. We've only played 5 Premier League games so far. So getting carried away, we shouldn't. But I think the squad depth is going to be important going into the Christmas period, where it's congested. In January, when again it becomes incredibly congested. I know we're only 10 weeks away from the transfer window reopening again, but ultimately I think those with bigger squads will probably end up doing well. That's why I think Tottenham, I think they'll do okay, that the Europa League might sap them slightly. I think Wolverhampton Wanderers will do okay. I know they've had an iffy start, but I think that they might have a reasonable go at trying to finish in the top 6 this season. I think Everton and Aston Villa I've already mentioned. And Arsenal should do better. I think they made a mistake. I think they overthought the formation, the Willian playing as a false nine on Saturday against Manchester City, I thought was probably trying a bit too hard. Don't know what message it sends to Lacazette either, because he's the top scorer so far. Aubameyang needs to find some form because he hasn't scored a goal yet since signing his new contract. But if they can click into gear, they can have a very good season because they've got a lot of talented young players as well. And the squad actually isn't that thin.
You know, you just talked about squad depth then, and we spoke about Virgil Van Dijk just a little bit ago. But how much of an impact is that going to have on Liverpool's season? Because we know that he's the best player. He's probably the best player apart from Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, and probably one of the most influential when it comes to the back. But there doesn't seem to be a replacement for him in that team in regards to squad depth. It's very hard to replace a player like that anyway. But just to bring someone in, what do you make of his injury? Is it going to have a massive impact on Liverpool?
They'd already conceded 27 goals in 16 games since the 0-0 draw with Everton in June. I mean, that was with Virgil van Dijk in the team. So this is a team that have started to concede goals and have lost that habit of keeping clean sheets, which was such an important part of their title challenge and title win last season. If you remember, a lot of their games, they won by a single goal right at the very end, late goals. Now, if you're conceding goals for fun, it makes that process a hell of a lot harder. Yeah. So without Virgil van Dijk in that defence as well, you're climbing a mountain. Now, I mentioned that it's only 10 weeks to transfer window, but they need a world-class centre-half to play alongside him anyway, because Joel Matip isn't the answer to that question. And Joe Gomez, he's 23 now. He should be consistently performing at a much higher level than he is. He did quite well towards the back end of last season, but his form has dropped off for whatever reason. I do hope that he hasn't been affected by the incident involving Raheem Sterling a year or so ago. I mean, I know that he's quite a shy character and he didn't like being in the limelight during that period. But he hasn't flourished as I think Liverpool hoped and Jurgen Klopp hoped that he would. So it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw Fabinho move back into that role at the heart of defence on a more regular basis. I think that might be the solution.
Am I right in thinking you are a Chelsea fan?
Yeah, we don't shout about it too much because I think when you're a football commentator and you're covering all the teams across the country, you have to be neutral. And listen, when you're working, you're completely neutral. You do not. It does not come into your thinking. I think when you work in football, as long as I've been working in football now probably for 25 years, a long time. I'm so old now. You don't have the time to follow your team in the same way that you did many years ago. You obviously have friends that are dotted around the league and playing for teams. When you get to my age, you start having managers that are friends rather than players. So look, it's a slightly different relationship that you have with supporting your team. So, but yeah, I grew up as a Chelsea fan. Yeah.
Well, their season has been interesting. They've scored a lot of goals, but they've also conceded a lot of goals.
Yeah.
What do you think that they sort of need to do to stop the goals going in and conceding? And do you think that Frank Lampard is the right person?
Frank Lampard is a Chelsea legend. He's the top scoring player in their history ever. He can do no wrong in the eyes of many Chelsea fans, and quite rightly so. This is a guy that is etched into the history and the fabric of the football club. I think he's had a very difficult time melding the newer players with the older guard. Last year, obviously, he had to play a lot of younger players. That comes with inconsistency. I know that if that is said, the coaching staff at Chelsea don't like that excuse that young players could be inconsistent, because actually, when you look at some of the performances from last season, the players that were inconsistent were arguably the more experienced ones. Defensively, they are not up to scratch. Now, whether that is because the forward players are so intent on being so high up the pitch and they're sometimes sloppy in position and give the ball away and there's not enough protection for the back line, that's one argument, and I saw that written up today, and I thought, yeah, that's a good point. A couple of times on Saturday, I saw Kai Havertz gave the ball away, leading to a goal. I think that there was another incident where it seemed as if Chelsea just didn't have enough players back when Southampton were on the attack. But ultimately, that doesn't excuse every single shot going on target, seemingly going past the goalkeeper, Rida Balaga. and it doesn't excuse Kurt Zuma's back pass, which then Arida Balaga slides out and goes nowhere near. So they have to come up with a defensive system that protects the back four, and they have to make sure that those who are involved in that defensive deployment are good enough to keep the ball out of the net. And everyone's conceding goals at the moment, but the regularity and the frequency with which Chelsea are throwing leads away is not right, and they have to solve that. I mean, the only benefit they've got, the only plus point is that everybody else having crazy starts to the season, but they need to get a grip of it very quickly. The goalkeeper will change as soon as Mendy comes back in. I don't particularly think Mendy is the world's best goalkeeper. I don't think he's ever going to be a Golden Glove winner or someone that's going to be transferred to Real Madrid. But he's better than Kepa.
Yeah,
and the defence don't trust Kepa. The coaching staff don't trust him. So they've got to get him in the team.
Actually, just talking about defenders, and one that stood out this year especially is Harry Maguire. After that sort of Mykonos incident that happened over the summer, and even before that, actually, he wasn't really playing that well after lockdown. There were certain games, especially the Tottenham game last season, after sort of the lockdown, Harry Maguire in the Chelsea FA Cup game. Then you look this season and he's had a really bad season. The England game sort of showed that even further. We know that he scored this weekend, and United were probably better defensively. But what do you make of Harry Maguire's sort of I'd call it the last 6 months or maybe even 4 months? Well, what do you make of his last 4 to 6 months?
I think we're so quick to bring down our heroes in this country. Harry Maguire 2 years ago was patron saint of English football for his role at the World Cup. 2 years before that, he was wearing an England shirt in the crowd at Euro 2016 as a supporter of his nation. He's had his troubles off the field, and put that to one side because that may well still yet to be resolved. But on the field, you mentioned that he didn't play particularly well at the back end of last season. Well, statistically, I think he'd probably argue with you on that, because going from January to the end of the campaign, Manchester United hardly conceded a goal in the Premier League. They were very good defensively, and that was one of the reasons they finished at third in the table. So I think at the end of last season, maybe the last couple of performances or 1 or 2 performances here and there, he might have put a few feet wrong or made the odd mistake. But ultimately, I think he's done very well for Manchester United. He scored a terrific goal at the weekend, which got them back on level terms. He is a captain. He is a leader. He did play a massive part in the Players Together campaign during the lockdown period with Jordan Henderson, but didn't get the headlines that the Liverpool captain did. Those two were the driving forces behind it. I think he's obviously had a lot of weight on his shoulders that has preyed upon him. The yellow card that he picked up in the first instance in the England game against Denmark was a terrible challenge. It was someone who was trying to ensure that he was seen to be making a tally. It was someone trying to play themselves into form. It was the wrong thing to do. It was a rash challenge. He made it in a terrible area. I mean, there's no need to dive in that area of the field. It was inside the Denmark half, and it was wide on the left. Why is he travelling so far out of position to do that? Secondly, he then pulled his hamstring. I think or tweaked his hamstring just a little bit, and as a result, his touch was so bad for the second yellow card, and then he overstretched. And then I don't know why he decided to follow through, but he got it all wrong. But people make those mistakes, and I'm delighted that he went back to Manchester United, and it actually worked out for him, because England need him. England need him. They're not blessed with a load of great centre halves. England need him.
Before we finish, I just want to ask you, who out of all the teams you've seen play, all the players that you've watched in your years in the sports world, who do you think is the greatest player that you've ever seen play live?
Well, it's easy to sort of answer that question, because I've been lucky enough, privileged, to be in the Bernabeu when Cristiano Ronaldo has been playing for Real Madrid. I've been in the Camp Nou when Messi's playing. I was at a Champions League final in 2011 where Messi tore Manchester United to shreds. So I've seen those two players, and whoever I say apart from those two is not going to be technically better than Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. But I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with people and they all say the same thing. Yeah. So let's move that to one side and recognise that they are the two best players that have probably ever played the game, with the exception of maybe Maradona and Pele. But, you know, none of us saw those play live. And I'll tell you a story about another player who I think was the best player I ever saw perform live in the Championship. And that's Robert Prozanecki, who played for Croatia, Real Madrid, Barcelona. He's an absolute legend of the 90s. And he pitched up at Fratton Park when Milan Mandaric was the chairman of Portsmouth. And he was overweight. He was scruffy. He looked like he'd never seen a razor. He didn't look like your archetypal European superstar footballer. Let's have it that way. He was out after training. The first thing he'd do was light up a fag and smoke himself silly. But one afternoon at Fratton Park, he played for I think, I can't remember if it was Graham Rix's team. I think it might have been Graham Rix's team against Barnsley. He scored 4 goals, including one of the best free kicks I've ever seen. Fantastic, absolutely sensational. He grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. And Portsmouth still didn't win the match. They drew 4-4. Afterwards, we collared him in the car park and we said to him, can we talk to you about your hat trick and your goals and blah, 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 blah. And he had a fag in his mouth, took it out, blew smoke away, and he just went, we drew. It was pointless. And walked off. It was fantastic. It was just an iconic moment. It was a maverick footballer. He was a throwback to the old school. Fratton Park probably has never seen anything before or since like that. He's absolutely terrific entertainment. Total box office. So, you know, maybe I'm being a little bit romantic because it was when I was first sort of breaking through as a journalist and as a football commentator. But I loved commentating on watching him.
Cool. Sam, it's been a pleasure having you on. Always good to pick your brain about football and the current affairs. And yeah, hopefully we'll speak to you very soon. But for this show, we do appreciate you talking about sort of things that are a bit controversial in this day and age in regards to football. But yeah, it's been great to actually talk to you because I've always heard your voice in the car quite a lot, traveling to, I don't know, boxing events or whatever I cover. And I've been always listening to your voice. It's been good to sort of pick your brain on a few things as well.
Thanks, guys. Cheers for having me.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Great to be joined there by Sam Matterface. Make sure you stay tuned as we have part 2 coming up where we are joined by a familiar face, Mark Bosnich. Make sure you stay tuned. Plenty more coming up.